Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Gallowgateshots FPL Show. We are back, and yeah, I mean it's been a bit of a whirlwind recently. Like we stopped doing these for a little while, didn't we? I can't
Yeah,
remember. Can't really remember what happened. Well,
I
what
think
happened,
it was
Dan?
the inconvenience of a child being born, Matt. Also, it did work out well. We both weren't having a great time of it when we were when we were doing these, but it all got better after that magically. So if you could have another one when it's all going badly, that'd be absolutely terrific.
I mean, it got better for one of us, I'd say. I mean, me not so much. To be honest, it'll be interesting to go back to the last episode that we did to now to see how weathered and aged I look after doubling the amount of children that I've got to look after and changing jobs within like the space of a week. Um, so yeah, I mean, if you want to do that for a laugh, have a little look. But I mean, the wrinkle lines are pretty damn clear at the minute.
No,
So yeah,
fantastic, Matt. You look absolutely fantastic.
oh cheers, mate. You're gonna make us blush. So in terms of well, it's a new season of FPL, really, isn't it? Do you want to tell everybody, Daniel, who you are and what you do and what your best kind of FPL finishes and etc. etc.
Yes, so I'll make this quick. I'm Daniel. Historically, I do my own podcast, which is the main event, which is a Champions League fantasy football podcast. Something that no one in the Northeast would have cared about until this season. So feel free to follow us on Twitter at UCL Fantasy Pod. We don't usually plug my podcast on these. It's sort of just kept separate. But I thought, why not? If people want to actually play the Champions League game next year because Newcastle are in it, spoiler, probably won't be picking any of our assets anyway. We'll have to see what the groups look like. But yeah, feel free to follow us. Feel free to give our pods a watch as well later on when we actually release some worthwhile content. My best personal finish in FPL is 44k. Last season, it did get better. I think we might talk about last season after we sort of left everything behind, maybe after this introduction. But it went better, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean, just a little word about the main event podcast. Like we well, I used to have a Twitter account. We both kind of met each other on Twitter, and then I was a guest on the UCL Fantasy podcast that you do because obviously we're both geeks. We both play as many fantasy sports games as humanly possible, and obviously we then realised that we both went to the same high school, which was really odd. Um, like literally, was it before we recorded or just or was it? I think I listened to one of your podcasts and noticed that you were a Geordie and like sent you like slid into your DMs and was like, "Oh, are you whereabouts are you from? Because I'm from there too." And like how all good kind of romances start these days.
Yeah,
So yeah, so that's a bit of a background. My background is I have played for blooming years, um, more so more seriously the last 5 years, some would say. Obviously, I was at uni like when I was playing it and kind of gave up after a few weeks, like most people do. But I've got a little bit of a weird trend where I normally have one good year, then one shit year, one good year, etc. So in 1819, I finished about 400k. Then in 1920, I finished 19k, which was the COVID year. And then 2021, I finished 650k. And then 21, 22, 13k. I was sat around 1k at about March time
I remember
and
this, Matt.
absolutely dropped my arse big time. So that was a bit sad, but still obviously my personal best. And then last year, which I'm going to segue nicely into the next bit. So around about the World Cup, I was about 4 millionth in the world, which things weren't going very well. Erling Haaland was having my life. And then, I mean, it got better. Don't get me wrong. I was having like green arrow after green arrow after green arrow. Um, but I was just kind of like not really bothered because I think I got about 500k, and I think I said in one of the like previous episodes my target was 500k.
It was 400k. I'm sure you said you wanted top 400k. Have I ruined the dream now?
Well, no, definitely not because spoiler alert, I finished 630k. Like I got to about 500k, and then kind of just went a bit meh and just fell apart a little bit towards the end because I was just being a bit daft with it. But we're back. It's a fresh start. Um, I mean, if I have a bad year this year, my whole reputation and like
It's
the
gone.
idea that the whole kind of self-image of, I might have a bit of a clue about what I'm doing, just totally goes out the window, and I'm a shell of a man. So no pressure. What was your story back end of last year? I know you did fairly decently, actually.
Yeah, I did really well back end of last year. So I think I was about 1.4 million when we left everything and ended up finishing 65,000. So I'll take that all day long.
Nice.
Most importantly, I finished third in a mini league that I was about 25th in, and I won 75 quid for it. That's that's
That's what it's all about. That's what
I
it's
was.
all about.
And honestly, it got down to the last day for us actually winning the mini league. The last day was a little insurmountable, but yeah, actually got down to that point where I thought I might be able to win this, and I think it was all down to my chip strategy. My wild card just played an absolute blinder, and then I played the other chips at the right time. So yeah, I'd say the chips were what helps me most. Not a single one of those chips was wasted, really. I did really well in all those. So I think that's probably something that we should talk about in future episodes, chip strategies, all that sort of thing. But yeah, to get from 1.4 million to 65k and get 70 quid in my skyrockets, delighted.
Yeah, mate. No. Do you know what I followed your little surge up the league really closely. It was nice to. I mean, it was funny because it kind of coincided with when we stopped doing these episodes.
Oh, it was exactly
Which
when we
is
stopped doing these episodes.
which is a little bit nervy, but yeah, I think we've listened to a few kind of comments from like the members of the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel. We did kind of ask for some feedback, and one of those things was chip strategy, a little bit more kind of advice as to week by week. So we have taken that on board, and we will be doing a little bit more of that. I think when the chip strategy talk comes around, which is normally just after Christmas,
Well,
we
I
will.
think wildcard, we're going to have to talk about wildcard before the season starts, in my opinion.
I think when we do a final draft, we'll like the final draft episode, we'll talk about kind of early thoughts of when we plan to wild card, because that'll come into just general strategy as to why we've picked the team that we've got anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we'll deal with that as and when it comes. But yeah, what we're going to do this week anyway, because the prices only came out, like the full game came out on Wednesday. So everyone's been throwing content out. Obviously, you've got your familiar kind of YouTubers who are doing all that FPL content, immediately putting out YouTube videos. We left it a little bit just to kind of have a little bit of a tinker, or as what I said to Dan in a WhatsApp message, a fiddle, which I looked back and thought, I hope he understands what I meant. So I have had a little bit of an FPL fiddle.
Flashbacks to
And
that time you told me to answer my daughter, little children.
yeah, we'll try not to do stuff like that this year.
From the BBC recently, by any chance, Matt?
No, I haven't actually. No, I was suspended quite recently. So yeah, what I think what we're going to do, we've obviously had a little bit of time to have a look at the prices. This week, we're going to look at the Newcastle United players. Obviously, this is a Newcastle United podcast, so I thought we'd have a little look at all the Newcastle players, what we think, have they been priced correctly, and actually, towards the end of the episode, we'll have a little look and see whether we'll actually have any in our team. So, Dan, fixtures haven't been kind.
No, they have not been kind.
First 5 fixtures. I mean, at least we get them out the way with, though.
I don't mind the fixtures from a Newcastle United fan perspective. They're terrible from like a fantasy football perspective, but from a Newcastle perspective, Villa will be missing arguably their best player in Jacob Ramsey, who broke his metatarsal, unfortunately, in the World Cup and the Euros, the under 21 Euros. It's not nice to see, obviously. He's a really, really good player, and he absolutely ruined us the last time I played them at Villa Park.
Yeah.
But undoubtedly, that game does become easier without him on the pitch. And we are at home. Man City away. Man City don't usually start the season very well. They usually take a little bit of time to build up and to get into the rhythm. And I actually think Pep has a system in terms of making sure his players are at peak physical condition after Christmas. I think you see that a lot with Man City. And I think it was a complaint that he had, obviously, from not winning the Champions League for so many years. Obviously, they've won it now. but they're a team that they're like a train. It takes a little while to build up that momentum, but when they do, that's when they become unstoppable. I think getting them away early doors is really helpful, really, really helpful. Liverpool at home, Liverpool will be miles better. Brighton away, that's always hard for us anyway, but they're getting better. Brentford at home, which is a good fixture, especially with no Ivan Toney. And then they start getting kind of from sort of game week 6 onwards, you've got Sheffield United, Burnley, West Ham, Palace, Wolves. You've got Arsenal, but then you've got Bournemouth, Chelsea. So like Newcastle players from a football perspective, I think it's worked out quite well. We got a lot of the tough teams out the way, then the Champions League starts, and then we start playing a little bit of mediocrity / lower teams.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to touch on Man City, I think they tend to like you say start slow, and I think there'll be a bit of a hangover. I'm kind of predicting that they did so well last year. We saw it with Liverpool, that was the year that they won the league. Like notoriously, the team that wins the league tends to start slightly slower, because it's like how do you kind of get yourself back up to fight again for it?
Yeah.
So I think that's the case, and I think I'm interested to know when we play Brighton in regards to the end of the transfer window, because there's a likelihood that they lose Moises Caicedo as well, and I can kind of see that rumbling on into the kind of deeper end of the transfer window.
Yeah.
So
no Levi Colwill as well at the minute for them, because Chelsea looked like they might be keeping him.
Yeah,
That's massive for Brighton. If they lose Colwill, who's their best defender, and then if they lose Caicedo, who's protecting the defence, they might become a little bit of a soft touch. They've got Dahoud, but he's more of an elegant, deep-lying playmaker opposed to going to stick his foot in kind of player.
Yeah, 100%. So I think on paper, very tough fixtures, but there's factors in which could help us out massively as long as we come through pre-season unscathed, touch wood.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't see many people owning many Newcastle players for that reason, for the start that we've got. There'll be the kind of the familiar faces, I think, but we'll come into that kind of later on when we kind of do our final drafts and things like that as well. So we'll start with goalkeeper. They've priced Nick Pope at 5.5 million. Currently, 13% ownership, and he's joint highest most expensive player, the same as Edison and Alisson. Is this fair, or is he being priced out of anybody owning him?
I think it's fair. I think it's absolutely fair with how he performed last year, and obviously the points that he got usually dictate the scoring. He's a miles better option than Alisson and Edison, because Edison's a bit of a troll, but you definitely don't want to be using a Man City spot on Edison. And again, you're probably not going to be wanting to use a Liverpool spot on Alisson. You're going to be wanting to go for either Van Dijk if you're budgeting, or Trent if you're going for the premium.
Yeah.
And again, like for Man City, you can have Ake. I don't know whether they're actually going to bring in Gvardiol or not. Diaz, John Stones is the same price as Edison. Like you just 100% want John Stones because he might get goals. He's probably going to play that inverted fullback into midfield sort of position. So as far as the premiums go, he's 100% the best option. It's just not my playing style personally to be paying $5.5 million for any goalkeeper, unless it was that Petr Cech or Van der Sar when they used to keep 13, 14 clean sheets in a row. I think the most for me that I like to go for is 5 million. Yeah. I think your choices really should be a 5 million and a 4 million, 2 4.5 millions, or a 4.5 million and a 4. That's probably like, I don't think you want to spend more than 9 million on your goalkeepers, because you're just taking it away from other players that can get you points. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
So yeah, especially when their ceiling is essentially 6 points, unless this is like notorious for saving pens.
Yeah, Nick Pope saves a lot, so like I can see him. I think Nick Pope ceiling. I think if we keep a clean sheet, Nick Pope gets 7 to 8 points. Largely, Trips is probably going to get max bonus if we keep a clean sheet, but I can see quite easily Nick Pope having to make 3 saves a game because we
Yeah.
aren't like a watertight defence. We just do really well and we're force shots from good areas from a defensive point of view. But the fixtures for me aren't nice enough to warrant going for Nick Pope 5.5 million. Spoiler for any sort of wildcard chat. My general play is to play the wildcard somewhere between game weeks 6 and 10, usually around 7 or 8. And especially when our fixtures change, I think it was game week 6, that's when Nick Pope becomes a very, very viable goalkeeping option. You get 4 million in to sit next to him. Bang, there you go, enjoy it. But there is once we've talked about the Newcastle defence, because it's in particular for one defender who's very highly owned, is another reason why I'm going to stay away from our defence and goalkeeper for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, it's a perfect segue, that, because ultimately the player that you are talking about is Kieran Trippier, who's weirdly went from being, what was he, 5 million at the start of last season to now being...
I had him in my game week 1 team last season. I thought 5 million for Kieran Trippier is absurdity. He's gonna, obviously, we saw that he was on free kicks before he got his injury. We improved defensively when he played. We improved defensively anyway under Eddie Howe. And he was on other set pieces. It was just like, what on earth is happening here? And especially with how good Callum Wilson can be in the air, Trippier's crossing balls. Obviously, didn't really work out that way. But still, he's well worthy of the 6.5 million price point, especially when he outscored Trent Alexander-Arnold last year and Trent's 8.
Yeah, and obviously we'll go into the kind of general pricings when we do like the goalkeeper and defender episode that we're planning on doing next week for other teams. But I think you're perfectly right to kind of make that comparison. He's the same price as Robertson at 6.5 million. I thought originally, I was like, that's a bit too much. Like, I would have paid 6 million for Trippier. So I just can't see we're being as defensively solid this year as what, and to be honest, Trippier's form of providing assists really died off towards the back end of last season. And actually, with Tonali coming in, and because Tonali's like set pieces are unbelievable. Like, I can't see Trippier keeping every single set pieces, because it's just not.
Even
we're not bringing in
last year.
Share.
And was it Almiron? I think Almiron took 1 or 2, although a lot of them actually were short corners too. Trippier to cross it in, but still.
Yeah, so obviously Trippier, I think it's a fair price, but not a price that I'm wanting to go near at the minute. The one that is in the middle and is a bit of a curious one is good old Fabian Schar, Sexy McSexface.
Yes.
5 million. Do you just get Botman?
Well, when you said the player I was talking about was Trippier, the player I was talking about was Botman. He's 31% owned, 31.2% owned. Bear in mind, Trippier is 33.9.
I'm amazed at that, by the way. I'm absolutely amazed.
The price, a Champions League defender at 4.5 million, and here's the thing. I think he's priced correctly, and it's because we talked about this last year. We normally joke about the group chat or now just I'm in. If you want in it anymore, you left Twitter. About there's like a joke going around. We mentioned this on previous podcasts about how Dan Burn would tuck in while Trippier would bomb up down the right. That's not happened since the World Cup. That isn't how we play it anymore. Trippier still bombs on. Dan Burn bombs on. He's just a little slower at getting back than Kieran Trippier. And that leaves Botman and Schar exposed. If you look at how many clean sheets we had before the World Cup in comparison to after the World Cup, and actually still scoring goals as well, opposed to just grinding out some random 0-0s or that 1-0 against Fulham where Isak scored in the 88th minute or whatever it might be. We looked more defensively frail. We didn't keep clean sheets. And with the Champions League coming as well, we don't have any other new centre-backs coming as of yet. We have been linked to a couple, especially I think we've been linked to one today. But as it stands, I don't think we're going to be keeping loads of clean sheets this season, especially in those opening 6 games. or maybe the 6th one from Sheffield United onwards. And one of the concerns is for Botman at 4, A for Botman and B for Trippier. Schär doesn't really count for this. So if you wanted, for me personally, if you wanted to punt on one of these players, I'd punt Schär, not just because he's got like his XG last year was like 5 point something and he only got 1 goal. So he's overdue a goal. He scored on the opening day last year. He is a much bigger goal threat than Botman. But more importantly, if we don't keep 3 clean sheets out of them first 5 games, casuals or non-Newcastle fans, whoever else will be selling Sven Botman and Kieran Trippier, and their prices will drop.
Yep.
On my wild card, that's when I want to pick them up. When Kieran Trippier is down to 6.2, 6.3, and Sven Botman might be a 4.2 million defender,
which would be an absolute absurdity. Which
but
it's possible, 100% possible. You see it in seasons gone by when you had like Pedro Neto, who, because he was like 5.5 million and everyone thought Wolves were going to be amazing, like he was about 30-40% owned. After the first 3 weeks, he did absolutely nothing. He was like 5 million by the time game week 6 or something rolled around. So you're totally right.
Even Everson, the Leicester goalkeeper, he started off at 4. By the time I picked him up when he started playing, he was 3.7 million.
Yeah. So it's definitely, it's a good bit of advice, that, by the way, for anybody who isn't sure. Like, it's fair enough buying everybody who's like highly owned, thinking, oh, there's like strength in numbers. As soon as that person starts underperforming, everybody, so that, because especially that first week in particular, it's full of even the most disengaged managers who will just think, he didn't score this week, even though he's a centre-back, sell him. And because of that bulk selling, that algorithm will just make their prices plummet and you won't be able to move off them.
When you look at our fixtures, I don't think they're in danger of a game week 1 drop, but game week 2s and 3s, if we don't perform well. And the thing is, if we do perform well and you've got Fabian Schar, you're still getting the points, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're paying an extra point. Personally, I'm not going for any of them. My plan is going to be have none of them, wait until the fixtures change, gamble. I still think like we'll win games by that. I honestly do believe we'll get at least a point against Man City away. It's not a doom and gloom, oh my God, Newcastle are going to get stuffed. I just don't think we'll keep clean sheets while we do these things. And ultimately, that's what I want from a defender. I want clean sheets from them. When we start rolling around to those easier fixtures and they're in preparation for the Champions League, that's when I want a bit of the Newcastle pie, and I'll go for one of those players that's dropped in price, for sure. Trippier, I think, is an absolute trap, personally. And I had him from game week 1 last year. I absolutely love him. Saw his value immediately at 5 million. Didn't have to wait a couple of weeks. But 6.5 million is premium price. I know Trent's 8, but that's a wild premium. Whereas if you look, I think Trippier and Robertson, the next most expensive defenders together, is 6.5. I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then you've
on his points last year, but I think you have to look at how the season played out. Like the reason why Trent's going to be 8 is because he started playing in central midfield. So Trent's probably going to be an 8 million defender, but playing in central midfield out of position. Yeah. Trippier and it's like Tonali and Longstaff, because I think Longstaff will probably play at the beginning of the season.
Right? Do you think?
Well,
obviously we can digress onto midfielders now because we've talked about defenders for ages.
Yeah, we'll digress. But Botman didn't get started immediately last year. It was Dan Burn and Fabian Schar with Target at left back and Trippier at right back. And Eddie Howe clearly rewards great performances. And it was only until Matty Target started not playing very well, he had a few stinkers.
Yeah.
That Botman came in and Dan Burn shifted across to left back. Sean Longstaff proved his importance last year when he was injured and he wasn't playing, and we looked overrun at times. Villa away, especially, I don't think anyone had a great game, but the Arsenal game wasn't wasn't the same as, that Man United game at home or that Chelsea game at home, even the first Man City game at home. It just wasn't like those games. Even Liverpool at home, we had a mad 10 minutes. Other than that, we absolutely battered Liverpool. It was just 10 minutes of utter insanity that let us down in that game. So if we just judge Eddie Howe and Eddie Howe, Isak were bought for 65 million. He wasn't playing. Callum Wilson was playing. Callum Wilson went on a run of how many games without scoring? Because I think Eddie Howe will reward those players. And it's going to be interesting to see how he manages the situation. I wouldn't be surprised either way if Tonali does start or if it's Longstaff. It'll be one or the other because they're both... That's the rotation in midfield. It's going to be the same three. It's going to be the same formation that we've played. And on that right side of the three, it's going to be either Longstaff or Tonali. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was Longstaff first game of the season at home.
Yeah, no, I agree. So obviously we moved, just to kind of clarify for the defenders, you've got Burn, Craft, Target, all 4.5. Then after that, it's just 4 million fodder, including our technical captain, Lascelles, who probably won't see the light of day from the bench. So in terms of midfield, we've got Almiron, who's our most expensive midfielder in the game. But no midfielder out of all of our midfielders is above 5% owned, which kind of tells you either A, there's better options from other teams, B, rotation and there's no real clarity on who's going to be starting, and C, like the prices just don't really kind of make anybody want to buy them because there's the structure of people's teams. I feel like the structure at the minute, which we'll talk about in other episodes when we talk about midfielders, the structure kind of allows for 7 million and above midfielders from, some would argue, stronger, more teams with bigger pedigree. So nobody's going to dip in to pay 6 million for St. Maximin, who might not start and doesn't have the output. What do you think of Almiron? Because at the minute, because Almiron is the same price as Bernardo Silva, and I think he's only 5% owned. I don't think he's going to do the same as what he did last year.
I don't either.
He might not even start. I think we'll probably strengthen right wing.
Maybe. And Jacob Murphy can play there. I thought Jacob Murphy had a better end of the season than Mickey, personally. So that's a rotation waiting to happen. And Almiron's goals last year, loved them, by the way. Loved the ascendancy that he made after being such a grafter, but always being someone that you'd never want one-on-one with a keeper. And to be fair, I still feel that way about him. I don't want him running through one-on-one, but when he was scoring those goals, he deserved them, seeing his little face all happy. But his goals were predominantly either tap-ins, or absolute worldies. And I don't know how replicable worldies are.
Or deflected worldies as well.
Like when you're in that moment, when you're in that flow, and when you've got that confidence, and everything you kick just turns to gold, it's like a moment in time, and it's when you want to just put into a jar. I don't know if you can do that again. It's all about pre-season. The reason why I had Miggy again from match day 1 or game week 1 last season was because he absolutely dominated in pre-season, and that built his confidence and showed us that he did have an eye for goal, because he'd never done that in any of the other pre-seasons. So for me, it's all about pre-season with our players, with our midfielders, who's chomping at the bit, who's in good form. And one of our issues is spreading the cost of the goals. So Willock, Bruno's a good finisher, but he plays too deep. He's more of a deep line playmaker. Willock and Longstaff get loads of chances, but aren't great finishers.
Agreed. Yeah.
Obviously, Almiron got his glut, but then Murphy chipped him with some. Where's Gordon going to play in all this? Because he's had an outstanding under-21s. He won't be playing at the start of the season, though, because he'll come back from pre-season late. I actually think he might try and come back early because of his interview saying how he wanted to get fitter. Then St. Maximin, where do his minutes come from? So the only player that I'm really considering at the minute, and it's still not from game week 1, is Joelinton.
Yeah.
And it's because I firmly believe Toon Paul's put a poll out, and it was frightening, the answer, I'll be honest. So feel free to criticize me in the comments for this. But it was basically, what position would you like to see Joelinton play next season? Central midfield, or left wing, or left attack, whatever. I think it said left attack, but left wing. Where would you think the answer was for that question?
Centre midfield.
Right. He played more games last season at left wing. He played more, like nearly double. He was our left winger last year.
But he was rotating with Joe Willock, wasn't he? There was like that relationship there. Like I totally get it. He played, but he was like a left side, because from what it's essentially what I've seen of Tonali is that he does something quite similar, but box to box wise, and he'll drift in he'll come in down the right, but obviously not swap with a winger. But tactically the way which Willock and Joelinton worked was that Joe Willock and Joelinton both played centre mid and left wing over the course of games.
Yeah, so I had a look at the heat map.
Right.
Not true. I was
really?
a bit, yeah. Joelinton, obviously, a little bit skewed because at the end he was playing right centre mid when Sean Longstaff was injured. That's where the predominant amount of games he played in centre mid came from. But his starting position was left wing. His heat map on that left, like the left touch line, is just blazing red, whereas Willock's isn't like that. And even the goal against West Ham, Joe Willock isn't hanging on the shoulder of defenders, is he? Joe Willock is going to pick up the ball. He's going to drive into the half space between the midfield and the defence, and then to cover when he makes that run forward, Joelinton will drop into midfield to cover Willock's run.
Right.
Not just like randomly swapping around or anything. Joelinton's starting position is hanging on the defender. It gives us an out ball because he's an absolute tank. If we want to pump it up to him, he's got an amazing first touch. So you can bring it down with his strength and his technique of touch. He's great at dribbling wide left to come into the box. But I think he scored against Tottenham in the same way, like a ball straight through, and he's hanging on the shoulder of the defender. And I think he scored 6 goals in 15 games or something there last season.
Do you know what, mate? No, the more you mention it, the fact that ball played over the top, him getting played through on goal, I'd rather see him in the more advanced position because he was finishing the chances.
Well, I believe he will be our left winger next season at the start. And I think him and Willock will have the same relationship where Joelinton's on the left wing, Joe Willock's in the centre, because Joe Willock as well, I don't know if you can remember Man City as well. I appreciate Sam Maximan played on the left wing that game, but Willock picked up the ball from inside his box and ran in borderline into their box, and he burned Kyle Walker for pace whilst dribbling the ball. It was like, I hope people remember it because it was absolutely amazing. But Joe Willock does that. Like, he picks the ball up. He can pick the ball up deep and drive, but he's the one that'll try and drive into the half space with his dribbling and with his pace and his agility to do that. Obviously, that's why we're looking at a player. Well, I know that we end up not looking at Maddison, but looking at a number 10 who can pass balls and sit in the half space to actually pass it through. Because the best that we had last year, other than Bruno, who was playing as a holding midfielder to facilitate play that way, was probably Joe Willock, but he's not really that kind of player. So yeah, more people wanted to see Joelinton in centre midfield, but for me it's going to be Longstaff or Tonali on the right, Bruno in the middle, Willock left centre mid, and there's going to be Joelinton left wing, like it was most of last year when he was in really good form, banging in goals, especially towards the end.
I think, do you know, I do agree with you. I think that poll might be skewed by the recent transfer rumours of we're going in for a left winger, which might mean that people want to see him play left wing and Joelinton centre mid. Just to kind of move on a little bit, because I think most of our midfielders, like you say, are wait and see.
Yeah.
There's definite value in there because if Harvey Barnes does come in, what price is he at the minute? I literally don't know. But Anthony Gordon, 5.5 million. If he starts getting regular game time, plays on the he can play on the right. So if we don't buy a right winger, Harvey Barnes down the left, Gordon on the right, that's an exciting couple of wingers there. Tonali as well. I think he's 5.5 or 6 million. Got it. I think although it's exciting that he's playing for, I don't think he's going to get the goals and assists because that's what's going to get you points.
Yeah.
Don't do the classic. Like the only advice I'm going to give you now is don't just get him because he's signed for and he's mint.
He is class.
You've got to get somebody who's going to score actual fantasy points. Because I think he's like 3% owned already. So yeah, and then everyone else there's no really point in talking about because it's like Fraser, Longstaff's 5 million, bless him. And then you've got Anderson, Hayden, Hendrick. How are they still here? At like 4.5 million. And Garan Kuol at 4.5 million. If he gets a Premier League loan to like Luton, that could be decent. Keep an eye on that. And then that brings us nicely on to strikers, of which we've only got two. So Isak and Wilson's a funny one. So Wilson's come in at 8 million, the same price as Gabriel Jesus and Ollie Watkins, who at the minute, in terms of ownership, are far more popular. Basically fixtures, I think, and injury kind of history. Isak is 0.5 less, which I think is purely because he's been playing on the wing a little bit.
Yeah.
Not because of ability, because I think Isak's miles ahead of Wilson in terms of ability or technical ability. You might disagree. But who starts that first game of the season? Or do they both start? Because we've just said that Joelinton's going to start on the left, or Harvey Barnes. If that's the case, who's playing up front?
It's one of our
flip of the old coin, isn't it?
Our players. We don't know which one of these two is going to start. The reason why I think Wilson is valued higher, and I agree with this, is that he will only ever play through the middle. He's either the number 9 or he's sat on the bench. And even if he comes off the bench, he can get a goal. Isak might play up front. He might play left wing. I don't think I think Isak played left wing. Again, if we recall correctly, it was the second half of the Everton game when I think Sean Longstaff had came off. And for the rest of the season, Joelinton played right-sided centre mid. Isak played left wing. And I think other than the Southampton game, I don't think it suited Isak at all. Personally, that's just my personal opinion. If people disagree, that's absolutely fine. But other than the Southampton game, when it was still a slow start, was second half, the sort of came to life. Obviously, the assist against Everton was unbelievable. But that was sort of the game where he was already in the game. He'd been playing a striker up until that point. So I don't think that position suits him. I think Joelinton and Sam Maximan are better left wingers than Isak. Obviously, I think Isak is absolutely class as a striker. But I've got no idea which one of these two is going to play. I can't go near them.
Do you know what? It's really nice because all those years of where A being absolutely crap and B being really predictable, now we're in a position where you couldn't pick the team. You have no idea who's going to start. And it was like, I kind of envied that of Man City from an FPL point of view. It was like Pep Roulette was quite fun because the reward of getting the right players, because you knew Man City were going to absolutely smash everyone.
Literally showing signs of being a psychopath, yeah, Matt. Pep Roulette was fun.
No, sorry. It was fun when you got it right. So the risk versus reward.
Mahrez isn't start. People, I mean, Akanji getting me 1-pointers at the end of last season was killing me softly.
Yeah,
I can't stand Roulette.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's going to be a bit of Eddie Roulette this season, especially when Champions League kicks in, because we all know that certain players in that team don't have the legs to play 38 games in a season, let alone God knows how many we're going to play this year.
That's the problem with our assets throughout the season. up until the Champions League starts, which is usually the beginning of September, the first, second week of September generally, I think we'll play pretty much the same team. But the first 5 fixtures, we need to see who that team is and to get them out of the way. And then as soon as the fixtures turn nice, we're getting into rotation territory because of the Champions League. And that's why I think all of our players are priced in all of these no-man land pricing, except for Nick Pope, who'll just play every game if he's fit. And obviously Almiron for doing so well, but still 6.5 million for a player that scored the amount of goals that he did last year is still quite cheap. And then Wilson and Isak, they are like right in Isak especially is just right in the middle of here, there. So it's a shame because like last year I started with I think it was 2 Newcastle players. This year I can't start with any of them. It's a bit rubbish. But I think on my wild card that could change.
Do you know what I mean? You've summarised that beautifully. That kind of brings us to the end of the prices anyway. And I think I totally agree. Because of the prices, they're there, and you know that if you've got a midfield of say 7 million and above, you know that you can, if say Anthony Gordon starts absolutely smashing it, you can drop down to him. He's not it's not unachievable. The only one, say for example, if you wanted to go budget in defence, you're not going to get a Trippier if he starts like getting 12 pointers every week, and at 30% ownership, that'll absolutely murder you. So that's one thing I'd say that I'm probably a little bit scared of through not going any Newcastle players early on. But I typically play a game week 3 wild card because I get a proper itchy trigger finger. Very impulsive.
I'd like to consider this podcast now officially your therapy.
Yeah, why not? So obviously that's the prices. Let us know what you think in the comments. Whether there's any Newcastle players in your FPL draft at the minute. Obviously it's very early days. My draft definitely isn't staying the same. So yeah, let us know in the comments. Please like the video. Obviously click the notification bell for more content from us and across the Gallowgateshots YouTube channel as well. There's loads and loads of content. Obviously it's on a little bit of a quiet in quiet mode at the minute with pre-season and things like that. But obviously as soon as that season kicks off, it's buzzing with content. So yeah, keep an eye on it. Every week we will be producing some FPL content this year. Over pre-season, we're going to cover each position based on each team. So next week we're going to do goalkeepers and defenders. We've bunched them together because they're normally the slightly more boring positions. Then we'll cover midfielders the week after, then forwards. That brings us nicely to the week before the first week of the season, where we'll reveal our final drafts, talk about wildcard strategy, and yeah, like hopefully kick things off with a bang. We'll also have a league as well, so a general Gallowgateshots league. We'll also have a league for members, so you can become a subscriber for as little as £2.99 a month, and you'll get access to a members league and a Telegram group, which is always like riddled with activity, and for want of a better phrase. So yeah, honestly, I nearly got to the end without doing anything stupid. So yeah, so the Telegram group is always buzzing, or riddled, whichever way you want to swing it. That might actually make you want to buy it more. So yeah, so yeah, keep an eye on here. Just obviously keep an eye out for us because we're not going to go away. And we're going to be throwing loads of content your way. Unless I have another child. God, honestly, if I have another child and try and do this stuff, it's just not going to work, mate. I might literally next week I'm going to end up with like literally just grey hair, mate. Honest. Right, that's it. I'm fed up now. I'm going to bed. See you later.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone. See you later.